Great. So wonderful. Thanks for being here, everyone. Thanks for being here, Mark. I'm going to just jump into it and read Mark's bio. Mark Rice is an artist and musician living in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, working in many different modes and mediums. Mark creates 2D and 3D works of painting, drawing, installation, and sculpture, but he's professionally trained as a printmaker. Mark also employs screen printing and relief printing to create visual narratives, garments, and unusual products, packaging, and appliances. Rice received his MFA in printmaking from the Rhode Island School of Design, sucker, and his BFA from Indiana University in Bloomington, Indiana. He's exhibited his work at the International Printmaking Center of New York, IPCNY, Contemporary Center for Printmaking, and has upcoming exhibitions at the Flux Factory in Queens, New York, and Remark Print Workshop in Albuquerque, New Mexico. He recently had his work collected by the Philadelphia Museum of Art and the Free Library of Philadelphia. Rice has taught drawing, printmaking, and art history at several colleges, including RISD, the University of South Carolina, and Tyler School of Art at Temple University. Rice currently works in Philadelphia as an on-site studio educator for the Fabric Workshop and Museum, a senior art studio director at Cristo Rey Philadelphia High School, and as a freelance designer and contract printer. With his partner, Mark founded Pressure Club in 2017, which is a small artist-run print shop and gallery in Philadelphia, where they create print editions and hold exhibitions of work by local and regional artists. Mark is another one of these wonderful people that I have to say a real perk for me in this job. Mark is an old friend of mine. We went to grad school together, although we weren't there at the same time. We happened to be in Providence at the same time and had mutual friends and got along really well. So we've been friends for, I guess, about or over 10 years now at this point.
Oh,
and
my God.
yeah, it's been a long trip. This is, again, I mentioned this, I think, when I introduced Naima last year and a couple other people, like one of the, and Rit as well, like one of the perks of this job for me is bringing in talented friends of mine to talk about their work. And so it's a real joy for me to bring my very talented friend, Mark Rice. So let's give a Zoom round of applause, a muted round of applause.
So weird. Awesome. Well, thank you, Cooper, for that introduction that I wrote. But thank you so much for inviting me to come. I'm really excited. So Cooper and Emmy both asked me to talk about this, very specifically this part of my practice that I don't really get a chance to like focus on very much. And so it's really cool to be able to really, hopefully I don't have too many slides here. I know we only have an hour, but I'm just going to kind of jump into it. So let me make sure this is going to work okay.
Mark, also just as a PS, like we blocked off 2 hours in case things go over. So like if be as generous with your time as you want, man. But,
okay, great.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, thank you. So you got a lot of the original sort of my stats already kind of talked about, but I basically grew up outside of Indianapolis, Indiana, in a very rural area, and these are basically my stats. But I basically have a lot of these sort of different sort of formats that I like to release my artwork in, and a lot of that is because I am a musician. I've been performing live for about 25 years now, mostly as a drummer, a songwriter, and visual artist, printmaker, and then graphic design. And all that stuff sort of comes together in my art practice, very much so. So they all sort of feed off of each other, and you'll see a lot of connections between these two things. But as the longer I live, the more they seem to bleed into each other. And so this idea of product design, music, and art, they all sort of like exponentially influence each other. So I just want to start off, this isn't the focus of this talk. This is normally, if I'm giving an artist talk, at least the last couple of years, I've been talking about my more like traditional art practice, like printmaker, kind of like very much about carving of creating narrative through these different prints. And so this very long running series has been a series of linocut prints. So I like to create these very long epic narratives and very much influenced by really old texts, the Nuremberg Chronicle, things like that, but also sort of modern comics. And so I'm like exploring these narratives about this one specifically is called The Exit and the Outlet, and it's about life after the internet. And so a very quick version of the story is the internet sort of goes away and nobody knows why, and basically they go through all these like emotional reactions, go try to hunt down the central location of the internet and ask it where it's gone to, and they realize that it wants to leave the planet. It's become sentient and wants to leave the planet, and it gives all of humanity a year to undigitize everything that's been digitized. And so it sort of brings up these ideas of archiving and memory and the reason for making objects, and what there is to learn from handmade objects. And so I just really like, this is the very slow artwork that I make. It's very much narrative driven, and I have like a basic structure for the narrative, but I really like to sort of keep it open. And I know now how it ends, but when I started it about 5 years ago, I didn't really know how it was going to end. And so I sort of accumulate these references, and I'm very much influenced by ukiyo-e, Japanese woodcut printing, and like I said, comic books and that nature, sci-fi, fantasy, that type of stuff. And so these are all like, it's incredibly manual, it's incredibly brutal, like physical process. And the only reason I'm showing you this is because it's kind of different from my other work, and they very much complement each other. And so these are all hand carved, usually just with an X-Acto knife, and then hand printed without a press as well. So it's kind of like as manual and as you can get. And so throughout this narrative, these prints have been getting more detailed. So it's very much about drawing, transferring, all the really nerdy printmaking stuff that I really enjoy. And then the prints get even more complicated. And so each of these are buildings that actually exist, that, like, this is a parking garage in Florida that actually exists, that's now been transformed into an art building for making physical all the digitized artwork that's ever been made in the world. And so there's all these references. It's just like packed with references all over the place. So I just wanted to show you this stuff because the other stuff is very, very different from this. But they very much influence each other. And so in this talk, I really want to talk more about this whole other practice that I have that's not very traditional. It's kind of about experimentation and finding new modes of exhibition and finding new contexts, and kind of talking about print. And print is this like amazingly enigmatic sort of thing where it can be, it can be a Xeroxed pamphlet, it can be a fine art print, and so you get to wear all these different hats and to choose all these different contexts for your work. And so I really have been enjoying the last 10 years or so, maybe a little more, this like very large area in between this idea of like product design, graphic design, and fine art. And so I just put in some like, things that happen to me a bunch in that zone, where we have like prototypes, what-in wonders, habits, collaborations, all these type of things that sort of it kind of fall in between those two things, at least for me. And obviously this is a visualization. Art is not a straight line in any way, but I just thought that this was a kind of a nice way to show this massive universe that exists between these two definitions and the sort of spectrum that creates. So for instance, this is something I actually just made a couple weeks ago. This is actually that same print. I'm always interested in the multiple and what with printmaking printmaking, it's so amazing that you get to have a multiple, and then you get to choose all these different ways in which you can use them. So I rarely just edition prints and have an edition. So I usually end up using the multiples or the cast-offs or things to make new things and experiment in different ways. So this is actually this very large lino cut print, 24 by 36, that then I cut up into postcards. And so my mom lives in Florida. She's an artist as well. And so I've been slowly sending her these postcards over the past month. And so just thinking about that as sort of a very simple sort of symbol as far as like the difference between the sort of more fine art process and the working with graphic design and products. Okay, so the way that I was sort of introduced to like product design, graphic design, was through music. And this also echoes true with a lot of the sort of collaborations that I work with as well. And all this stuff, it's kind of just about, for me, I think it's really about staying active in a lot of different ways, kind of spinning a lot of plates at once. And I really love the way that they sort of bleed into each other, and how things sort of influence each other. So as far as graphic design goes, I've been in bands for about 25 years. This is just a smattering of some of the ones I've been in, but I'm usually playing drums. I'm usually in the back, but they're usually sort of rock bands, psychedelic pop bands, things like that. It makes you realize that you can't take a non-lame band photo. But this is just an example of some of those bands that I was in. And so I was for my job for about 7 or 8 years was actually touring around the United States, making music. And then we were playing in a lot of these venues. This would have been in like early 2000s. So we were playing in all these like very strange like art galleries, experimental venues, cooperatively run spaces and stuff. And I was, like I said, I was in first I was in rural Indiana, and then I was in Bloomington, Indiana, so which is still a pretty small college town. And this was like a big eye opener for me, where it's like you could create these spaces that were sort of house all this like performance and artwork and all these types of things, and then working collaboratively with people to make art and put on shows, make merchandise, make music, all this type of stuff. This was just like a really active time period for me, and it's still like very influential, I think, today in my work still. So I started in the middle of that sort of season of touring. I started a collaboratively run space with a bunch of fellow artists called the Art Hospital in Bloomington, Indiana, and that ran in different forms for about 5 years, which seems to be about the lifespan of an active art space. And so during that time, getting really interested in graphic design. The way a band that's not super famous makes money on the road is t-shirts and posters and releasing albums and doing the artwork for that, and just sort of thinking a lot about the same techniques that you use on a fine art print are the same things that are made when you're creating like an artist's book or a poster that just goes. Just think really the context of what you're making, and how that seems to be pretty much everything as far as printmaking goes, where it says a lot about the content, or influences the content a bunch. And so this is something that I still do today, where I design stuff for bands, sort of strange album designs, but also pretty straightforward band posters and stuff as well. But it's really nice. It's really fun to work with people, and kind of it's nice being a printmaker in a more traditional sense, where you're almost working with clients, and that can really be. I think I wouldn't enjoy it if it was the only thing that I was doing, but it's actually really nice to do that, as far as being influenced by that and getting inspired by aspects of those projects. So then we talk about this vast like chasm that exists between products and fine art prints. And I have a bunch of like artists that were influential for me for that. Talking about Marcel Duchamp's Box in a Suitcase. This is I believe it's like 79 pieces, but this is a set of, he basically chronicled his own artwork and created these suitcases with a box with all these sliding out panels. And they're all these reproductions of his own artwork. And so you would be sort of purchasing a recreation of a certain era of his artwork. So they're this sort of like strange sort of box set idea, like a modern box set for an LP or something. But you're sort of purchasing like an era of Marcel Duchamp's career. But it's this kind of crazy idea of like reproducing, repackaging something, recontextualizing your own work. I don't know if anybody was able to see the Hilma F. Klimt show, but that was absolutely incredible. And I mean, much less to say that the paintings were great, but there's this one sort of small part of the show that were her blue notebooks. And this was when she was, I mean, during her whole career, she was sort of not secretive, but like very worried about her paintings, her imagery getting out into the world. And she really wanted it to kind of control the dispersion of her imagery. And these were these catalogs that she made of all of her paintings. And I think a lot of them had both color, and then she would make reproductions of them so they're in black and white. But this was a way that she could basically show her paintings to collectors and people that were, so she didn't actually show them the real paintings and get her ideas stolen or have to show them out in the world yet. So this is a way to sort of shop around these ideas without actually showing them all the way. But I really enjoyed that. It also was like, beat Marcel Duchamp by like 35 or 40 years too, which was pretty incredible. So I remember, I mean, everything Adrian Piper does is amazing. This specifically, just talking about products and like sort of distilling performance in an object. This probably a lot of you are familiar with this, but I just remember seeing this when I was like 22 or something, and it like blowing my mind. But her calling cards, sort of distilling this, at being a very light-skinned African-American woman, she has to, basically tell people that she's Black. And so these calling cards that basically, create a product that is a stand-in for this like repetitive conversation that she had to keep having over and over again. But I thought this was mind-blowing as far as the power of sort of a product or distilling a performance into an object. And then I really love these. I think this is somewhere kind of in between these ideas of these products as stand-ins for larger sculpture performance, these salesman sample cases. And it's really funny actually to look them up because it really was everywhere, and it was all door to door. The coffin one's really great. But just the idea of these, these sort of stand-ins for larger ideas. So as far as the products go, they really work for me as sort of I don't really keep a sketchbook. And so the products work for me as it's a proving ground for larger sculpture and installation. It's also just a way to like sort of test out materials. It's a way to sort of play with print and sort of also be a mirror image of some of the like sort of more longer, more arduous for printmaking that I'm doing as well with the lino cut prints. So for the purposes of this presentation, I don't really think of these things in any sort of category. It's sort of a free space for me. And so for the purposes of the presentation, I sort of created some categories of things, and they all sort of relate to each other. So the first one is prints to help you focus, reflect, or at least slow down. And so the first is this is almost like a habit for me, I guess, but what's really the difference between that and a practice to a certain degree. So, Puzzle Tout Nouveau is a way to, I basically buy thrift store puzzles, and I put them together, and then sort of reuse them as a substrate to create a unique print, and then dismantle them and put them in a new box. And creating this sort of project, this sort of labor. I always think about Mike Kelly's sort of labor, love hours, that type of thing. But sort of the idea, the context in which sort of an abstract painting can exist as both its own image and as a sort of stand-in for this like sort of work, this process that was putting it together. This is a type of text, the text-based dialect of English that I sort of created to slow down the reading of an idea or a story. And so I was using a lot of text in my work years ago, and I think when there's text, there's obviously things are moving at different speeds. You want people to engage with your visual, and you want people to read the text, but text is read so quickly that I started kind of using this like phonetic way of writing to slow down, physically slow down, and make you have to perform the syllables of each word. So this thing on the left here says, "I did not use the internet today." And so it sort of slows down this idea, so you can't, it's impossible to sort of read it too fast. And then I got really into that. So basically all the imagery disappeared, and it was just about the writing. And so I've used this in a bunch of different ways over the years to sort of slow down that idea of reflecting on an image, on an idea or story. Using printmaking as a means for prototyping, making products for prototypes and for versioning. And this is, I've already shown a couple examples of this, but this is kind of huge for me as far as like using print, like being able to make a pattern or a series, and then use half of the series to basically cut up and make different stuff. And it really makes it sort of makes things less precious, and to a point where I feel like I can really make some moves that would basically destroy something if it doesn't work. And so it's really nice being able to make versions of things and experiment in that way. So this is actually one of my very early product that I made, and it was all, I like to use a bunch of like salvaged or scavenged materials. And so this is a young, I was calling them young scrolls, but it's written in Rungish, and it's just a really small little packaged object. So just hand-drawn 22 unique messages. And so from that idea, this was sort of the sketch for some larger projects. This was a room installation that was sort of born out of that idea. And so these were all, this is called Young Male Tales, a Reading Room Annex, all made with salvaged materials, paper, banners, salvaged fence posts. And it's all stories from like sort of, kind of personal stories from being young. And I think it's the kind of stuff that I think can seem really sentimental and nostalgic and things like that. And so the Rungish works in two different ways for me, or it sort of codes it and makes you work for it a little bit, therefore making me a little bit less embarrassed to share very personal ideas. But then it sort of makes it makes these things kind of more like they're whispering to people. People really have to sort of commit to reading them, and sort of like working within the code to sort of figure out what's happening. And then sort of taking things like that and completely changing the context. Whoa. Taking this type of installation and then completely changing the context. So I was an artist in residence for a year at this residency called Hubbub in South Carolina, and this was one of the pieces that I made. So this is just in a very non. It's a field that is not known by very many people. So it's kind of the thing you just kind of come across it. You wouldn't necessarily know. There was no signage or anything like that. And so sort of just like seeing how people interact with this type of thing. When you come across text and you can't read it, some people get really frustrated really fast because it's something that's supposed to be, it's kind of working against what it's supposed to be doing. And so once again, these were sort of stories that I made a couple different color-coded categories for personal, dictated, overheard, and invented stories. So here's the installation shot from there. So it was really kind of something that, sort of a barren field that I got some permission, halfway permission, to install work into. And then I ended up making this, I hand carved a typeface for this that was kind of rough, and ended up making my entire thesis book for my for the Rodin School Design was almost completely written in this language. So it took you a very long, it definitely filled a lot of pages, that's for sure. But it was a nice way to sort of combine these ideas that I've been working with and in my thesis with this sort of coded idea of sort of slowing down and reflecting. And then sometimes it comes all the way back to the beginning and once again becomes a scroll. And so this was a sort of a gallery version of that product. And then sometimes I'm starting with an idea and I really like the intuitive nature of coming up with something that I necessarily know why it's important, why I like it. And that's why I think it's really important to have this sort of free space where things don't have to be art right away, or they don't have to like be really important right away. And so jumping in with something like this, I really like this sort of stamp. I was using it to make this different t-shirts for a while. This pattern of like faces, eyes, and noses. And then modifying that to then be just sort of surface design. This is called the Crowded Kerchief. That's my dog Bunny. And just sort of thinking about this being just a kind of a product. It didn't really have any meaning for me yet, but I still really liked it. I was kind of holding on to this idea. And then this was mid-pandemic. I really liked the idea, just thinking about how sort of Instagram and stuff was becoming people's complete world during the pandemic. Like, so there's the whole social world was social media, which a lot of people already had a problem with, myself included. And then that becomes your whole sort of social output. And sort of thinking about that, and how can I make like a really manual paper towel dispenser looking version of that. Thinking about how the audience can take away, have a contact-free, homemade, captivated audience simulator. And so you could, if you needed some eyes on you, you needed to feel like you're being seen, you could come up and tear off a portion of this, however many people you needed, and you could take it away with you. So interacting, making a print where the audience is supposed to sort of interact with. And then using that as well to make a sort of a very portable version of that as well. Okay, so versioning, that's a big part of it. And then I really like this one. This is like, I don't know, it's really important, especially as you get older, to have fun. And I know it seems really cheesy, but you're like working. I just can't have artwork be completely about work all the time. So this is kind of a nice limber sort of category. And sometimes once again, I don't really know what it means. And I sort of assign the meaning later. So this is a mid-pandemic field trip we took to Storm King Art Center in New Windsor, New York. If anybody's ever up in that area, it's really, really great experience, especially right now. It's a really sort of stress-free environment to view some pretty amazing monumental sculpture. But I really got focused on these that were in the area and sort of what they did. And sometimes you come across the sign and you don't see the artwork right away, and then you're like looking around for the artwork, and then it just turns you feel observed because you have this sign that's telling you not to do something. But then you also kind of like turns on, you're like, where's the artwork? Where's the artwork? And so I really liked that feeling, even if it only lasts for like 30 seconds there. So I decided to make my own signs using their sign almost completely, but just using a rainbow roll on it to modify it slightly. But I made a bunch of signs, and then I also made a postcard version so I could send it out to people who wanted one. But basically just to like sort of recreate this feeling out in the world. And so seeing a sign telling you not to touch the sculpture, and then you're basically like activated and you're looking for a sculpture, and maybe there isn't one. And so there's a version for the real world, and there's a version that's for mailing to people so they can put it around their house or yard or whatever as well. So here's an installation view of that. So thinking about, I don't know, it's confusing, but it's also like, I don't know, it's absurd. It's funny, I think. And so just thinking about all the cool places you can put these types of things and how it modifies behavior and stuff like that. This was an idea that I have for a really long time. It's kind of, there's child's clothing, like for toddlers and stuff, that does this very similar thing where it has the days of the week on it. I thought it's as an adult, I think it's a really fun. For myself, I'm not like super fashionable person, so it's kind of nice to have like I came up with the term automated or automatic fashion. So you just like, it's today, you put this shirt on, and you don't have to make these decisions. And so sort of color coding those, writing them in Rungish, just sort of slow that down. But just like that sort of being a similar idea, and just like the idea of a set, like you're sort of creating a circumstance for people to interact with something, and I really like that as well. And so they're all sort of different, but just like using print, using a very traditional silkscreen one layer print on a t-shirt to sort of have a slightly deeper, slightly absurd sort of trajectory. Kind of talked a little bit about this too, but the sort of commentary about the hierarchy of print and how strange that is. So thinking about, I just kind of this is a very quick little list that I made of like the hierarchy of print, in my opinion. This is of course completely debatable and probably just kind of a very silly construct in the first place, but it's very true. And so in practice, and so thinking about creating prints and how you can sort of modify those ideas of commercially printed objects and the importance of different types of exhibition contexts, things like that. So I really liked, these came from actually just a daydream of thinking about what if impressionistic painting were created in a different era. And so the reason that there's like water lilies and, you know, nature and things like that really just had to do with the time period in which Impressionism sort of fell into the timeline. So imagining that it just didn't happen when it happened, and it happened like yesterday, what would people be making impressionistic paintings of? And so I thought that these were the, I mean, in a sort of worrisome type of way, these things trigger so much more nostalgia and memory for me than any sort of nature does. And that's my own problem to deal with. But that's sort of similar, thinking about impressionism, thinking about the moment, grabbing the impression of a time period, and just sort of messing with those, combining this like commercially printed product print with and displaying it as a painting. Okay, and this is a recent print too, but once again, just sort of thinking about, I have a very like nostalgic sort of relationship with these candies. I think a lot of people do, considering they don't appear in any store that I know of. They just sort of appear in the world. I think that's kind of cool and mysterious. But just thinking about the candy wrapper, and yeah, and how that like this can be a sort of, you know, a Klaus Odenberg sort of reference, but it could also be just an enlarged nostalgic sort of experiment. And so thinking about another category, thinking about prints that discuss ownership, copyright, shared memory. So this was a kit called the Mr. Bat costume kit. And this was you got a screen printed mask and packaging with a discharge printed t-shirt. And so this was, I just sort of invented this story that Batman wasn't the first iteration of this character. He's actually, there's a precursor to him called Mr. Bat that was even older. And so this was like Batman might be cool, but you don't know the real Batman. There's this other guy that was doing it way before him, you know? And so like sort of creating this narrative that that there was a precursor to that, considering there's so much copyright around that type of stuff, and how big a part of like people's childhoods that is, that you're not allowed to really experiment with without getting sued. This is a sort of another sort of garment experiment, securities, deactivated apparel. I found a couple of these stamps that are those cancel stamps that people use to, like, you know, they have like bank information. Not that anybody's bank statements are on paper anymore, but you know, back in the day, it was something you would cancel out your bank stuff. Something, if you were like a paper shredding person, they kind of were both in the same sort of thing. So you can cancel out information, that personal information, so you weren't defrauded or something. So using these sort of security stamps as a way to cancel out and deactivate certain certain icons and insignia and brands and stuff that were on these thrifted t-shirts. But then of course after that, then stamping security brand on the back. So basically the non-brand being a brand. So sort of a catch-22. Okay, and then thinking about sort of the idea of the art kit as a distilled action, either a kit for creating future performance or a sort of performance residue. And so I have a bunch of, I love the kit because it's like, it really is this sort of action performance that then you sort of distill into a packaging. You could call it an artist book, you could call it a record, could be a musical album stuff, but this is all sort of different ideas of like basically ways of documenting undocumentable actions and interactions and experience. And I really love the kit because it offers so many possibilities, but really does sort of steer a performance in a certain direction. And so this was this is called the Women's One Piece Bathing Suit Analog Visualization Studio Kit. So this was just a one-of-one, edition one-of-one, but with these sets of cardstock with a bathing suit cut out. So a viewfinder, so you could basically visualize a future bathing costume. And so here's a little animated GIF kind of showing the different ways you can do that. So using different textures, everything in the world can be this sort of design. But this is the idea of infinite possibilities in a very simple, silly space. This is arguably just like a music album, but I thought it does have some sort of performance ideas involved. So this is my solo music group is called Fit, and so this is the album is just called Jogging, but I decided, of course, to make a box set for it. There's only 7 made, but each one has the album comes on this sort of iPod shuffle with headphones, and this is a little book that's full of motivational quotes. But the album was made by I would just record with my voice memos on my iPhone like a really long repetitive drum beat, and so I just played drum beat for like an hour, the same one over and over again, and it would changes tempo, changes a little bit, there's mess ups in there and stuff, and so then I would use that as that really long take as an armature to just put a bunch of different sounds over and create these really long sort of meditative repetitive pieces. So much like exercise, I mean, it was exercise, but sort of audio exercise, and then they're using this as a way to create an album that was to inspire non-competitive action and battle procrastination in this sort of setup. I thought this was kind of cool. This is a cool printmakery nerdy thing, but I made these sort of fans, and so when that fans out, it makes this eyeball. So that's pretty neat, pretty psychedelic. And so continuing with the art kits, this is the Horsefire sticker set. And so I don't know if do you guys have these? You guys gotta have these signs in Detroit, right? They're everywhere. Yeah. Okay, so but just like seeing these signs all over the place, I'd seen them a bunch, but they really like invaded my neighborhood because it's changing. My neighborhood in Philadelphia. And so I kind of did some research finding out what the deal was with these things. And there's all these, it's really shady practices of, people have these homes that they own, and then, if they have any debt or they owe a bunch on the house, or they have a bunch of taxes on the house, people swoop in, offer them cash, and then take their house really low, like lowball these people that are basically struggling already. And so it's this really like predatory sort of action. And so these signs, and I was like, you can't just tear them down, people put them back up. And so thinking about as a way to sort of make art out of that, make some sort of performance out of that, you basically get a sticker set that are these like silly like faux country western stickers that are all silk screen printed, and then you get a set of different R's, different shapes, because there's a bunch of different signs like this, and so you can find the right R for your sign that you're modifying, and you're supposed to basically just put it over, change houses to horses, and then use the other stickers to sort of cover up the number, so it can't possibly be used. So sort of like nullifying, negating the sign and making it a piece of art instead of this like sort of predatory signage. And I had a bunch of people send me pictures of like all over the place how they modify different signs and stuff. So this one's really good. You can tell someone like jumped up and slapped that on. It's pretty good. But anyway, so just that idea of the kit as a way to sort of create future performance. And then this is something like actually thinking about, like, I mean, I had to do it for this talk as well, like organizing artwork. Like, what does that do? How does that change the context? Organizing things for exhibitions, organizing work in categories, sharing it in different ways. It's just kind of an interesting sort of way to think about the context of your work and how you can change it drastically in different ways. So just thinking about class of work and like how similar like these salons are to like the way that products are placed in the supermarket, where like eyeline at the supermarket is like the most desirable spot, and like all the big products are at the eyeline, and then generic stuff gets lower, and stuff like that. But that's the same way that these sort of French salons were set up, whereas like the lowest section here was for all the people who had money, all the donors and stuff, and then then you might find your work at the top here at the very top, shoved in the between two paintings. And just thinking about different sort of organizational ways and how like absolutely incredibly awesome these mystery bag walls are at all the thrift stores, and how the organization of this type of stuff sort of changes completely this work. And so just and taking another nod from this sort of Duchamp box in a suitcase, I started doing these sort of stores for the products, ways of organizing them. The first iteration was called the Honor System store, and it was like just these big product walls, and there's the can, and it was modeled after the stores that people have at the end of their driveways, where they're selling like jelly or honey or corn or whatever, and you just pay. And so I really thought it was interesting to even as a experiment, as a proving ground, as a test market way to sort of see what products interested people and what people responded to and stuff like that. And then a different version of this, that was sort of the first version, and then I decided to create an actual container for these products. And so I renovated a travel trailer and got myself one employee, and made the VCS a convenience store, which was a travel trailer and then a store inside. Also, there's a bunch of performances and art shows that happened in it as well. But this is sort of the one iteration was a sort of portable store, basically creating a context for these products, a container. Here's a couple examples of some of the products that were in there. So once again, a lot of stuff that's just sort of prototypes, artist books, things like that, sort of testing things out. Here's some of the products inside the store. Okay, and also like, so as far as music, kind of drawing cues from the music collaboration, I have always collaborated with a bunch of artists, either creating collaborative works together or kind of having a more traditional, like I'm the printmaker, helping the artists make an artist edition type work, but then messing with that a little bit as well. So I find working through the mail, making postcards, that's always been like a huge part of my practice. I think it's just a great way to sort of work things out, get things out of the drawing board quicker, and see what's working, instead of doing too much planning. I feel like it never works for me. So these help me to sort of get moving on ideas and see where I want them to go. And then I have another project collaborating with different artists called Mr. Distro. And that is a newspaper box that just sits outside my house, and I'll work with about every 2 or 3 months. I'll work with an artist to create a double-sided, one layer double-sided silkscreen print So creating limited editions, open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, all for $1. And so just a way, it's a really cool way for, like, sometimes I'll work with the artists. I mean, all this collaborations are different. That's why I do it. It's really interesting to like talk to different artists about the possibilities. I like to work with a lot of artists that aren't printmakers, so they're coming from totally different spots, thinking about how you can take an idea and find a different way to sort of disperse it into the world. And so it's been really fun working with a bunch of different artists, and sometimes I'm there to consult if they need me to be, and sometimes people don't need me and they make it all by themselves. So but that's a really fun way to collaborate with folks. And so we're working on, I've done about 10, is that right? You're 10 or 11 of those releases. So anywhere from this is actually, this top left one here is a former student, people near and far. Cooper Holowesky did one too. Yeah, but it's really fun. And then sort of another version of that, larger version of that, called Pressure Club, which is the gallery I run with my partner Lauren Tacardini. She's also a printmaker, artist, educator as well. And so that's the first floor of our house is a print shop and small gallery. And so we'll work with different artists, many of them not printmakers, to create an artist edition, and then they contextualize that in a solo show that's self-curated. So that's been really fun. Basically, just to work with a bunch of different artists. I always get something awesome. Even people that are frustrating to work with, it's always something awesome comes out of every single situation. And so we work with every artist. Our most recent artist, Asha Shashadri, was really great. She works in collage. She's from the Queens area, and she did a lot of like work with the collaged print work at signage, handmade signage that's in the windows of all these shops and stuff in this one neighborhood in Queens. And so we ended up making this sort of silkscreen archival print project combined together. But it's really nice to work with those artists, and actually being a printmaker in a with a capital P, and sort of just helping other people to realize a project. And so every project's very different. And so as an example, this was a Meredith Sellers, who's a very sort of traditional oil painter, makes these amazing photorealistic works. She's from Philadelphia. But we made these two multiple plate intaglio prints with some silk screen in there as well. So we made these prints with her, and then she displayed them in a fairly minimal show with just a couple paintings in our space. So it's about the size of a Philadelphia living room. That's not huge, but very it's pretty good for a solo show. And then this is the opening reception for that show, sort of contextualized with the rest of her work. So I know that was a lot, but yeah.
First of all, thank you. Are you done? That's it, right?
That's it. Yeah, I'll stop talking.
Great, awesome. Well, thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
That was very generous of you. Yeah, I'm gonna hold on one second. I'm gonna do my help me with this. How do I get it back to the grid? If I go to gallery,
Here, I can stop sharing. That'll help.
Oh, that'll help. Thank you. I think we could just do like, if you're able to do the reaction hand, and if for some reason that doesn't work for you, just put your hand up and I'll put you in the queue if you have questions for Mark. Oh, also there's stuff in the chat, Mark. I don't know if you saw it, but I mean, it says if you ever want to have a franchise for Mr. Distro in Detroit, she wants to volunteer in the newspaper box in front of her house.
Oh, cool.
And she also declared herself as the #1 horse buyer in Detroit.
We should have our own club.
Oh, yes. We'll call it Sister Distro.
Yes.
Okay.
Awesome. I love it.
All right. So yeah, Arno, go for it.
I was curious, the products that you make, are these things that you actually sell, or is it like a performative, like they're for sale, or are they actually for sale?
Yeah, it's funny because I was thinking a lot about that making this, and it's funny because until like recently, until like Instagram, which is not, I haven't really been on very long, and it's interesting thinking about how you can't show certain work until there's a place to do so. There's like a venue to do so, and so a lot of that work I never showed at all until there was like, you could post pictures about it on there, because it's interesting finding a venue for like a product like that. So the answer is probably frustratingly yes and no. Some things are a little bit, some things are actually editioned and are easy to purchase, but yeah, it's kind of like I decide kind of each one's a little different. So,
but I will say, like, seeing the VCS at the Mazbeth World of Wheels show, that giant group show, like I walked in and everything was for sale as far as I could tell. Like it was like a functional sort of miniature bizarro CVS store, and like everything, and they were like mouse pads and other trinkets and other weird things, and it seemed like everything in there was for sale, and it was a pretty complete little store.
Yeah, that definitely was. That was, everything was for sale. I think I was still doing that was Honor System at that point too, I think, as well.
Wow.
So,
Linda, go for it.
Hi.
Hi.
So I know you talked a bit about how you had the like the cart for distributing the like the artist kits and things that people would buy and then work with. What other forms of distribution do you use for the artist kits, which are kind of meant to be more of a performative act? Like, is that something that's widespread, or is that something that's kind of like you have like select people that you distribute it to? I was just curious about that.
Yeah, once again, it's a lot of it is I'm really not. I like the illusion of having like this corporate kind of look and having like products everywhere and stuff, but there's really not. I think I auditioned that to like 25, and so I really don't. Every once in a while, I'll like outsource to like a shop or something. I've done some shop dropping too, which is really fun, like kind of dropping stuff into like a dollar store, putting it behind the sponges or something, that's like, but yeah, a lot of things are given away for free. So it's the idea of the store is more just to like cement the idea that it's a product and not an art piece, at least in the way that I'm talking about it, I guess. So.
Great. Tanner. Oh, Tanner, you're muted.
You're muted.
I was wondering if you could actually talk about a little bit about the role with the Honor System store and using a pay what you want model, and just like your thoughts on that, and that ties into music production, and yeah, all that. Elaborate, please.
It's interesting because that when I started doing that like a long time ago, people were like horrified. I just remember like both my professors and like they actually were horrified by it. And I think it's something that actually happens a bunch more now than it, like with like GoFundMe and like, I think there's a bunch more like that idea of like pay what you wish type idea. And I've always liked it. I think in grad school, I had a version of the Honor System store that was called a Store on My Door, which there's no mystery with the name. It was just a wall of products that I had. on the door of my studio, and like a cup. But it was interesting because it kind of balanced itself out, because every once in a while somebody would pay like $25 for something, and then I'd get like gum and a quarter, for something else, so it's kind of interesting in that way. But yeah, I really, I always hesitate to actually put any stress on any of the artwork to make money for me to live. And I think that's it. That's obviously that's a privileged position, but I'm a teacher, and I try to make money in other ways. And I really try to not have the artwork that I make be something that sustains me in any way. It's something that I do for sport. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I was just curious.
Okay.
Any other questions? I will say Mark also has a very active store on Shopify. I mean, I feel like that's how I find out about your things. I have a copy of the Weak-Minded t-shirts, or a set of the Weak-Minded t-shirts, as well as a number of other things that Mark has done. And it's usually like some sort of indication or teaser on Instagram that leads me to like a Shopify page. And then on the Shopify page, I find a million other kind of brilliant objects. So there's like kind of I don't know how everyone else gets there, but I think there's like a kind of trail of breadcrumbs sometimes that is left. But it seems like multiple outlets, right? You have like Instagram, Shopify, you have VCS for like various, the trailer. You have Mr. Distro, which is, I guess, generally pushing, other people's work, but it seems like a variety of methodologies, both like digital or variety of venues, both digital and physical, and like some location based and some mobile. So right, yeah, VCS can be anywhere, right? Like you can hitch it to your car as like the trailer and go anywhere. It's still a physical thing. It's not as ephemeral or as accessible as like Instagram or Shopify, but it's also more mobile than like Mr. Distro, for example.
Yeah, exactly. And there's something about, just thinking about it, I feel like there's some sort of barrier from making it just like an easy transaction. Like I always try to put some wall up, so it's not just like I'm running a store. There's like some extra step like you're talking about that you have to do, or it's like you have to follow something or something like that, just so it's not, I don't know, just to differentiate it from being like someone who's like cool band t-shirt, or something like that, like to, I don't know, sort of make it special, make it mysterious, that type of thing.
That's great. Emmy, I was going to call on you, Linda, but Emmy typed a question in the chat really before you had your hands raised, and she was asking, Mark, you seem really into things like codes, puzzles, jokes, and Mad Magazine feeling. Can you talk more about this, or like specifically like novelties as a subset of products?
Yeah, that might be some deep nostalgic thing. But I was really into to add to that list. I've been recently into mazes. I really like it as I don't know, I almost see it as a metaphor for me for a lot of like artwork. Specifically, I've been making a series called Easy Mazes, where there's nothing difficult about them at all to like get in or out of, but it's more about the structure. And I think that's kind of like the idea of wanting to go in and wanting to spend some time and then wanting to go out, I think, and creating an environment where that's something that you want to, engage with. And so maybe that's why, I don't know, coded stuff, it's, I want to catch the people that want to engage. And then if you don't want to engage, then you don't get to, or like you don't get to on the same level, maybe, as other folks. But yeah, someone else said Mad Magazine to me like about a week ago. I don't have a subscription or anything, but that is pretty funny. It's like, yeah, it makes me feel a little old, I guess, but but yeah, the novelty stuff, I think I don't know though. It's like, it's so much stuff is on phones and computers now. It's hard to like, I don't want to make digital art. So you have to sort of like relegate your ideas to these like more mechanical sort of objects sometimes to get your symbols across if you don't want to like make Arduino sculptures, or something. So
Emmy clarified in the chat, it was more, I think the Mad Magazine aesthetic was more about novelty and play.
yeah, no,
Yeah.
totally. Yeah, about play. I mean, I think it's too bad that people like, I always feel like I have to say something about it being fun. And I know how like that, how lame that can sound, and how like talking about things being therapeutic can somehow change their meaning and make the focus be more about the experience and not, it somehow like sometimes can modify the artwork if you talk about it being therapeutic for the artist. But I just have to have that. And that's the whole reason that I can like, I feel like do a bunch of stuff at the same time is because I try to make the situation as fun as possible for myself. And I think there's people that quit art because they'll set up some, really severe sort of situation. Like if I was just carving linoleum, I would have quit a long time ago because I have to balance it with something that's like.
Yeah, you need joy to sustain it for sure.
Yeah. So I think that's maybe that's where it's coming from too.
Linda.
So this is kind of going back to what you said before with talking about like who your artwork is kind of like geared towards. I was just curious, like who is your target audience? Like you have a lot of dispersion methods, but it's like, is that mostly through word of mouth that people find out about it? Is it for the general public to kind of come in and explore, or is it a little bit more secluded and kind of selective with who gets to come in and see and be part of it?
That's a great question, and I really like, and I think that has to do with kind of what you're, where like the context for any of that stuff. Like you think about like the storm signs, that's almost meant for the person off the street to wander up to it and be like, what is this? Or like the rungish stuff, that's like, dude or dudette off the street kind of walks up to it and they're like, what's going on here? But then I like with a lot of the products, and I think there's like, you think about something like the like Mr. Bat thing, like that's pretty random. You have to like care about Batman. You have to like, that has to be that has to have been part of your world or something. So that's definitely like pinpointed people that have that as like something that's nostalgic for them. And then if it's even funny, that's debatable, but I think it's funny. So having some precursor to that. So I mean, once again, I think that's stuff I personally really like to play on all those different levels. And I think print is so awesome for doing that too. Like you can make the most highest revered multicolor etching, and then you can make like a Xeroxed, folded book, and it's like, you can decide what level you want to be at or something.
Well, great. Thank you so much, Mark. Any final questions? You covered a lot. Oh man, it's so great to see you. It's so great to hear about your work. And yeah, thank you for being so generous with your time and your answers. Let's all unmute ourselves and give Mark a round of applause.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
I hear you're doing a project about distribution, so I would really love to see what people make.
Oh yeah, we'll send you images. We have some images already because we've it's been kind of incremental. It's been sort of expansive. It started with like a 1-to-1 and then a 1-to-group and then a sort of 1-to-campus, and now it's like 1 to a 2-mile radius.
Ooh, oh, that's awesome.
Yeah,
that's great.
Yeah. Cool. Oh, Doug has a question. Let's end it on Doug's question. How about that? Go for it, Doug.
Sorry. Mark, thanks for meeting with us. My question is pretty straightforward related to the distro project. I mean, you're doing so many you're including so many different communities and you're activating so many communities and conversations. And, you know, it seems like you're also pushing us to envision, which is really exciting. Do you have any tips for us with this distro project? You know, we have this 2-mile radius, but we're all sort of approaching it from different angles and perspectives. But with the little that you know about it, you know, what would you tell us?
Let me also, I gave Mark a very, very brief rundown of it, but we're at the point, is the final stretch of it. And by Monday, everybody has to make a piece that's distributed directly to a specific audience. And that audience has been drawn out of a hat, and it can't be an audience that they typically engage with.
Oh, man.
And also the edition size is determined by rolling 2 dice. So the edition size is somewhere between 11 and 66.
Brutal.
Yeah.
No, that's great. Man, I don't know. I mean, I don't know what can this, is it secret what your communities are that you're dealing with?
No, we all have a different one. Mine is, my community is collectors. And I have to run an edition of 62. You know, so it's pretty wide open. I mean, somebody else got bugs, for example.
Whoa. What?
Yeah.
I mean, everybody engages with public space in a totally different way. And so, I don't know, I feel like bug people would be definitely looking at the ground more. Just have some ground oriented situation.
I don't think it's bug people. I think it's bugs.
Oh, bugs. 4 bugs. Well, you got to write stuff in sugar then, for sure. Powdered sugar, soda. Do a screen print in soda. Yeah, I mean, it's really great. It's too big to, I feel like, to give any sort of like specific thing. Yeah, I mean, reach out to, if your community speaks, I feel like you could ask someone from the community, they might know. But even like thinking about, like, you know, it's so difficult, like as far as paper ads and stuff, or like if you actually in this any sort of traditional way, it's like where do those get posted these days, and who's looking at them? And you know, there used to be the bulletin board at the grocery store used to be this like golden place to like find the weirdest awesome stuff. But yeah, collectors, geez.
Well, I can chime in a little bit. I mean, one thing is that like everybody, the audiences that were drawn were all came from someone else's presentation about their work. So you can rely on each other in some ways. We talked about the other day. So like someone else who makes art for bugs, like go talk to them, or somebody else who makes art for collectors, talk to them. But I think your note about research and like engaging, if it's an audience that talks, like I mentioned to Doug, there's 2 actually coin and stamp collecting stores right on Woodward, like not far from here. Like go in there and just ask, like, what do people look for in coins, or what do people look for when collecting different things?
Yeah.
I think that advice of like, if they talk, try and engage with them and to get a little research. I think it's really good.
Or I mean, you know, some dark side of me wants you to make like a fake coin and like disperse them all over the ground or something. So people are like, you know, or like some shiny thing. Not that all collectors are collecting shiny stuff, whatever, but you know what I'm saying? Some decoy, you know, some that gets your attention. So.
That's awesome. Thank you. And the old school bulletin board, you know, they've got to be somewhere. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah.
They're still in coffee shops, I have noticed.
But the corporate coffee shops like regulate that stuff, and it's like they like take down anything that's not kosher, and everything's all organized, and that's not a good bulletin board. It's organized. Can't trust that.
Can't trust that. Cool. Well, thanks again, Mark. I think we're all set for questions, and like this is really great. Yeah, you were when Emmy and I were talking about doing this distribution project, you were the first person that came to mind for both of us. So
awesome.
It was really perfect. Thank you.
Well, thanks. It was really fun putting it all together. It's like I said, it's usually it's a side note lots of time. So it was fun to concentrate on it. So thank you.
Yeah. Thanks again, man. And to the rest of you, I will see you tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. on the Peristyle for the Kevin Atkinson tour. Sorry, my brain's not working. Great. See you tomorrow. Thanks, everyone.
Cool.
And stay in touch, Mark.
Bye, y'all. See ya.
Bye.